Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for If Wishes Were Horses, which is episode 15 of season 1 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It is also number 14 in my top 25 worst episodes of Star Trek, of the Star Trek franchise. So of my least favorite episodes, this is 14th to the highest. Anyway, this video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the first season episode, If Wishes Were Horses. So, If Wishes Were Horses is the episode in which the crew's imagination starts coming to life. A baseball player follows Jake out of the holosuite. O'Brien's telling his daughter a story of Rumpelstiltskin, who then appears and threatens to take her away. And then Bashir wakes up to Dax making out with him to find out it's not actually the real Dax, it's his imagination. And there's snowstorms in the promenades, there's fires that men on fire that don't really exist, and then there's a rift in space that's threatening the station. They throw a lot of technobabble at it, and they realize that it's all just in their head. And so they imagine it away, and then you find out they're just aliens who want to understand these Alpha Quadrant species better, and so they just made their imaginations come to life, and then just went away. The end. So many things wrong with this episode. I don't even know where to begin. Well, the one thing I think I will begin with is, this is, not to give away my ranking episodes of Deep Space Nine Season 1 video, but this is easily obviously it's number 14 on my top 25 list. It is easily the worst episode of Season 1 in my opinion, and probably in the top 5 worst episodes of DS9. Well, it's in my top 15 of the entire franchise. And it's funny because most people, for reasons I will never comprehend, say that Move Along Home is the worst episode of DS9 Season 1, and some even say it's the worst episode of DS9, period. And when there was a poll or a survey or something done at a huge Star Trek convention in Las Vegas, and sometime in the early 2010s, I think, it was voted as number 8 in the worst episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. And really, it boggles my mind that people could actually like this episode better than Move Along Home. Or think that this episode's okay, but Move Along Home is what's really terrible. I think Move Along Home, and I talked about that, I already did a review a couple years ago, I did a revisited more recently for my Patreon supporters. It's a fun episode. I have fun with it. It's lighthearted. It's a little, Quark's playing a game, they're trapped in a game, Cisco has to go and do a la Moraine, which is funny as hell. I love Avery Brooks overacting. It's just a fun, enjoyable episode. This, on the other hand, is a cheap imitation of other Star Trek episodes that came before it. It is trying to be more like TNG when it's not, with all the fucking technobabble. It comes off as childish, to a degree that dwarfs the childish portrayal in Move Along Home. I'm sorry, that's an objective fact. It comes off like it was written by a 12-year-old. Or, let's be more fair, let's not be so cruel. Let's say it comes off as if it was written for 12-year-olds. I'll be more fair that way. It's because adults can write shows aimed at kids, and it seems like this was aimed at 10-year-olds or 11-year-olds. I think even 12 is too smart for this episode. Well, except for, of course, the Dax, trying to make out with Bashir. That's not really kid appropriate, but it's still at that adolescent sort of kind of humor or story. In fact, I would say that the Dax and Bashir stuff probably the best part of the episode, and by best I mean least terrible. like, um, so yeah, as I said, like so many things that are so wrong with this episode. Like I can't. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be I can't get over my puzzlement of how anyone could say this episode is better than Move Along Home. And then that this is not the terrible episode. Let's do the Move Along Home thing is the terrible one. Now, since I'm talking about Move Along Home, I'll jump to the ending of this episode, because there's a point in the episode where like the whole station is about to destroy, and they think the whole Bajoran system. In fact, like that's a huge like statement. Like this includes like planets of Bajor, which has population of billions probably, and also all their colonies that are around in the solar system, and all that population, the entire Bajoran species is at risk of being wiped out, let alone the station itself. And they're building up this thing, this huge, they spent like at least a good 10 minutes there towards the end of the episode of, them using all this technobabble to try to figure it out, and they're throwing all this shit at it. And then finally Cisco is like, you know what? This actually doesn't really exist. There is no anomaly. There is no threat to Bajor. So everyone just lower the shields and believe it. And then the thing just goes away, and there was no really threat. It wasn't really real in the first place. It was just in, everyone's imaginations causing it. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that is far worse than the whole, it's only a game, and Move Along Home. I'm sorry, I'm sticking by that. Like, I actually thought that it's only a game thing was funny. Like, I actually love that they think they're all in danger, but it turns out, no, it's just a game. What the fuck? Whereas this is like that, but as bad as everyone says that it's only a game thing is. But it isn't. But this is. Like, this is the bad thing. This is the really... So you were just wasting our fucking time this whole time with the whole threat and like 10 minutes of straight technobabble. It was a complete waste of time because it was all in their imagination anyway, and all they had to do was think happy thoughts and it would go away. What kind of a bullshit cop-out. I'm sorry, this is, in my opinion, only a billion times worse than it's only. It's only a game thing was funny. This is not funny. This is stupid. And it renders like the whole episode a waste of time. Now, oh God. I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but I really don't know where to begin. Okay, so let's try to tackle all the things wrong with this episode. Let's start with the O'Brien storyline with the Rumpelstiltskin, which was supposed to be a leprechaun. And my God, I have to admit, hearing this story about how the writers wrote the script with the leprechaun does give this episode a little bit of a so bad it's good quality for me. Really, I although it's not on screen, so it's not like it would take enjoyment out of watching the episode, because watching the episode is like, torture. Like pulling nails. Like, I'd rather like listen to the Barney theme song on repeat for an hour straight than watch this episode and blindfolded and tied to a chair. Like, I'd rather do that than watch this episode again. But anyway, but the story of that the writers originally wrote the script with the leprechaun going around. sorry, that's hilarious. But it's not the episode itself that gives it so bad it's good quality. It's the behind the scenes, the concept of it. And of course, Calm Meanie outright refused to do it. Said it was offensive. He called up Rick Berman, said that Star Trek is above these kind of stereotyping entire people, and that it was racist, and that he would refuse to do it. Now, to their credit, they did immediately change the script. Because, a lot of other productions, especially, they seem to, a lot of times they would tell actors, suck it up. This happened to Terry Farrell several times, which has contributed to her departure of the show. And, and certain other actors at times, when they would complain, for example, when Garrett Wang very correctly complained about the dumbass fact that his character would never get promoted and was stuck as an ensign, they would just tell him to suck it up and deal with it. What was it Brandon Braga said? He said, somebody's got to be the ensign. What the fuck does that even mean? Sorry, I keep telling that story because I can't get over it. But anyway, so to their credit, they didn't do that here with Calm Meanie. And it was a big deal to change the script because it was written. They were ready to film it. The script had gone through all these phases, and because television production's so fast, boom, 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 the actors actually don't really get the scripts until days before filming starts. And so it was days before filming started, he was like, no, this is no good. You have to change it. And it was a major part. In fact, from what I understand, from what Michael Piller says in interviews, it was even in the original script, this story was the A story. It was the main focus that took up the most screen time was the leprechaun. I'm trying to remember when the horror movie The Leprechaun came out. I think it was around this time. Wasn't it 1990 or 1991? God. I'm not going to look it up because I don't want to pause this recording just to look up something like that. But I'm sure it was around this time. And maybe that's what they were thinking. Anyway, so yeah, it was the main storyline. So they had to do a massive last minute rewrite of the script. They were scrambling, and Michael Piller talks about how they couldn't figure out how to crack it. Oh my god, this is such an important storyline of this leprechaun wanting to steal sorry, you can't mention a leprechaun without laughing. Who wanted to steal Molly O'Brien, wanted to steal Miles' daughter, and they're like, how can we do this? And so Robert Hewitt Wolf came up with the idea of Rumpelstiltskin, because Rumpelstiltskin was also, a little person who was infamous for trying to steal children. And so Michael Piller did say that they had to make a lot of changes in order to input Rumpelstiltskin into the storyline, and he was he didn't even know where to begin, but he just put his head down and just took it one scene at a time. And mind you, they didn't have much time to do. They had to hurry to do it. Now, if anyone were to say, well, that's probably why this episode's so terrible, because it was such a last minute rewrite, I think you're being really, really, really overly fair to them. Generous, I would say. And I would not be so generous. I'm almost completely positive that this episode was just as bad, if not for... Oh, okay. To be fair, if they had shot this episode with the leprechaun following O'Brien around, then this episode would definitely have a so bad it's good quality. I would actually enjoy watching this episode the same way I enjoy watching Sub Rosa or The Fight. Just to laugh at just how stupid and what in the hell were the writers thinking. But as it is, because they changed it, of the leprechaun, it's just a bad episode. It's just a terrible episode that I can't stand to watch. And I don't, and some people seem to be willing to like forgive this episode because, well, it's early DS9 season 1 and it's before they really found their footing. Like, that's what I say about episodes like Babel or The Passenger or, Negus or Progress or something like that. Like, it was the early season 1. There was, Past Prologue. That's a prime example. Oh, that's early season 1. They were just finding their footing. They didn't find their voice. Where this episode's far beyond that. Like, you're being way too generous with this episode. You think, oh yeah, it's just because it was season 1. No, it doesn't matter what show, what season, or what anything it is. This episode is complete and utter dog shit. But anyway, sorry, I was getting into specifics. So let's talk about Miles O'Brien. And I'm sorry, but it's... I mean, no, I don't want to offend or speak poorly of the writers at DS9 because they're... And I know I'm trashing this episode that they wrote, but come on, I realize that they have to turn out these episodes, and DS9 in particular, season 1 was under the gun to come up with ideas very fast. So, and I'll state it out right. Like the writers, like Michael Piller, I've talked a million times about how he's an amazing writer. Ira Stephen Bear, I have a lot of issues with, which I'll get to later in the show, but he's still the showrunner of my favorite sci-fi show of all time, or one of my favorites. I think The Expanse surpassed it as my number one favorite, but still one of my favorite shows of all time. Ira Stephen Bear was the showrunner for, so he definitely did some things right. He was definitely a very skilled writer. So was Robert Wolf, who wrote a lot of the episodes with Ira Stephen Bear in the first 5 seasons of DS9. So these are skilled writers. I just want to be clear from what I'm about to say, that I can't believe that they were shocked that Kalmini was so offended. Like, they were surprised. It's not like they were offended or defensive or anything. They were just taken aback. They're like, oh, I didn't realize. Like, and that was Rick Berman's reaction, apparently, was, oh my god, I had no idea that this was... I thought leprechauns were kind of a normal thing of Irish culture or whatnot. And I mean, you could say it is, because I've heard from someone who visited Ireland and had a lot of like toy leprechauns and shit there. But it's one thing that you keep, like, it's holding up like a stereotype at a certain culture. I want to make this comparison. I don't know if some people might think this isn't a perfect comparison or a one-to-one analogy, but it's kind of like if Apu from The Simpsons appeared to Bashir and was following him around, or maybe even a more directly character who's supposed to be from India, because Bashir is... They never really said exactly his heritage. We know that Alexander Siddig is from Sudan, but like the engineer Singh in the season 1 episode of TNG, that's a deep cut. Lonely Among Us, who was obviously from India. If they had like Apu appear to him and be like, oh, I'm not going to do the voice. I don't want to be offensive, but that's kind of the same thing as having the leprechaun with O'Brien. Like, it's a I think it is anyway. I know some people might disagree, but yeah, it's like the it's too much of a cliche, I think is the word Calmini used, that and a cultural stereotype, and it's. I'm sorry. I cannot help but like start laughing whenever I try to picture a little leprechaun. And the funniest thing about it is that the writers thought there was nothing wrong with this. They thought, that they thought that this wasn't offensive at all. Now, granted, these were the same writers. Well, not the same writers, but the same creative team, let's say. Rick Berman and all them. Because this was before Michael Peller. But it was the same producers, same creative team that made the episode Up the Long Ladder in season 2 of TNG. And I talked about that a bit and that when I did my review for that episode. And Calmini was in that episode too. And at that stage, he was just a very minor guest star who was probably really hard up for cash. And so he didn't say anything, but he was highly offended by the portrayal of the Irish stereotypes, played mostly by English actors, by the way. And yeah, he found that highly offensive, but didn't really feel like he was in the position to say anything about it. But now, as a main cast member who they not begged, but they really wanted him to join DS9 as the main character, and they had to make some concessions to let him do movies. So he was in a really high, he was in a really high position, and this is why I think they listened to him, when he would be like, now this time, fuck you, I'm putting my foot down, I'm not letting you do this, bigoted portrayal of Irish people with the cliche of a leprechaun. Which, good for him, I must say, if I haven't said that yet. But I just find it so funny that the writers thought that it was nothing wrong. I don't know, maybe the culture in the early 90s was a little bit different. Maybe even me back then wouldn't, like 14-year-old me, if they did air an episode with the leprechaun, maybe I wouldn't even. No, I'm sorry. Even 14-year-old me would see how stupid this is. Like, and how, maybe not exactly how offensive it is, but I would definitely see it as offensive to Irish people. Mainly because it's such a dumb idea. And it's a dumb episode to begin with. But anyway, so Rumpelstiltskin, not an Irish stereotype, so that's good. But it's still fucking stupid. Like, it is so dumb having Rumpelstiltskin go around, oh, I will spin this thing into wool. The funny thing is that the actress who played Molly O'Brien, apparently in conventions when she was an adult, like more recently, talked about how this is one of the memories she has where as a little kid, like, I'm not sure exactly how old she is, like 5 or 6, very young, saying that this terrified her. Like, the Rumpelstiltskin guy, like, scared the shit out of her, and she had to have, like, someone, another adult, be around her at all times whenever he was in the room with her. And I can understand that. Like, definitely understand that. That's... Especially the way that the actor was being, like, really, creepy. I can understand. And that was, But anyway, so let me get into the main thing about this episode, though, is that, or one of the main things, really, there's so many, as I said, so many things wrong with this episode, but one of the main things is that they are really incredibly inconsistent with the rules of how this imagination thingy works. And this is something I've always noticed. And but I'd recently watched the Delta Flyers podcast with Robert Duncan McNeil, who played Tom Paris, and Garrett Wong. And Robert Duncan McNeil was talking about, he called this episode a turd. And it's funny because I was watching the Delta Flyers podcast throughout, Like, and, sometimes they are critical of certain episodes, but for the most part, they were mostly positive. And they were mostly like, would even move along home. See, they get me. They mostly were putting praise on it. And so I didn't expect it for him to say, nah, I didn't like this episode. It was a turd. That was so out of place. And so, to me, it makes perfect sense that this is the episode that he finally, and he did have a lot of nice things to say about Terry Farrell's acting, because she was on the podcast with him. But I think he did generally think that she did an amazing job, as so do I, because she was playing the two different characters side by side. But my point is that the one thing Robert Duncan McNeil kept hammering home over and over again that really bothered him about this episode was that the rules of this imagination didn't make any sense, or were inconsistent. And that, as I said, is something that I've always noticed. That Rumpelstiltskin and the Crazy Dax and the Bokai seem to become like the mascots, and they constantly stick around, whereas other things like the snowstorm or Quark's women or like the Gimme Jujangas or whatever, they're really emus. They just got an emu and called it an alien name. At least that's probably not as bad as the original series putting little horns on a dog and saying it's some strange animal. But anyway, yeah, and then Kira, when she sees like the whole pylon's exploded and it's on fire and a man's on fire and he just disappears. So how come some things are more consistently there all the time where others sort of blink in and out, kind of like Where No One Has Gone Before? Like sometimes Where No One Has Gone Before, and it's funny because Michael Piller specifically mentioned that this episode was kind of, they knew when they were writing it that, that's kind of similar to Where No One's Gone Before, but that was another show 6 years ago. No one's going to remember that. I'm like, you really don't understand how nerdy and geeky Star Trek fans are if you really think that's the case. And they obviously, Brennan Braga had the same attitude when he was doing Enterprise, because they ripped off at least 5 different episodes. But that's something I'll get to much later. But it's funny that Michael Pillard actually directly said that. Or, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, we did realize it was close to Where No One Was Gone. But that's all good. That was 6 years ago. But anyway, so where was... the inconsistency. So Where No One's Gone Before was consistent. It made a lot of sense. As their thoughts were coming to reality, it would pop in, pop out, and because you got to control it with your mind. But here, they don't really. It's inconsistent. Sometimes, like Rumpelstiltskin doesn't seem to go away as much, no matter how much O'Brien wishes him away. And then when the sexy Dax is bothering Bashir, and Bashir is not in the mood and just wants her to go away, and she disappears. But O'Brien is very irritated with Rumpelstiltskin and wants him to disappear, but he never disappears. So the rules are very inconsistent. And another thing is that when Quark is getting pissed off because all the people in his playing Dabo are winning, and he's trying to overrule them, and he'd be like, lose, and he can't get them to lose. Why doesn't he just imagine more money? That's just what I'm thinking. And you might say, it would be imaginary money, it would disappear after this whole thing happened. Then give the imaginary money to the customers who win, who wouldn't know where it came from. You could go in the back room, imagine more money, bring it out, and be like, here's your winnings, and then it will disappear, and he won't lose any money. Why didn't he think of that? But anyway, I don't know. Instead of getting all upset and shooing the women away, that always seemed dumb to me. And and yeah, so how come when Kira saw the Burning Man and the whole pylon? No, she wasn't in Nevada, but she saw the Burning Man and the whole pylon on fire, and the Burning Man ran towards her but disappeared right before he hit her. Why? Did she suddenly realize that he wasn't there? Doesn't seem like she did. She was like crawling in fear and screaming. It seemed like she was surprised when he disappeared. So why did he disappear again? Because the other rules were saying that they had to. That's what they said at the end of the episode when they had that huge anomaly thingy. And by the way, I'll get to that shortly. So many things wrong with this episode, but how the anomaly thingy, they said, oh, it's not there, and they wished it away. But Kira didn't wish this away. Why didn't it hurt her? So here's the other main question. This brings up a bigger question for me, is how come the big anomaly thingy was threatening the station, threatening Bajor, and even afterwards Sisko's like, oh, you put our lives at risk by doing that. But were they? Because that whole burning thing with the pylon on fire turned out it just disappeared and nothing was wrong. So it does make me wonder if they were ever in any danger in the first place. Because it's only a game. Sorry. God damn it. So much worse. But, but yeah, so were they ever in any danger? What's the consistencies? Why didn't the rift just disappear for no good reason, since the man on fire just disappeared for no good reason? Now, here's the thing I'm thinking. I'm sure other people are saying, oh, don't even try to think about it logically. It's just a funny episode. Just sit back and have fun. You know, I can do that sometimes. Like with Move Along Home, for example. But when the flaws are just so inherent and baked in to the plot and so numerous, and also the episode's terrible, not fun, I'm sorry, all these things are gonna bother me a lot. So so let's talk about Bokai first. So this was a nice little Easter egg because he was first mentioned in the episode The Big Goodbye. Data sort of blurted out, oh, he broke, Bokai of the London Kings broke Joe DiMaggio's record. And they even mentioned that in this episode. So good for them for being consistent. And I didn't have that big of I'm sorry, I just thought of another thing about inconsistency. How come when Bokai was like trying to pressure Jake into going to the Hollow Suites with him and playing baseball, like a fake Sisko appears like, well, oh, you really expect me to believe that? And then he promptly disappeared. Like, why is he disappearing? And why? I don't know. But anyway, the rules make no sense. But that's the first rule of fantasy. As I told you, if you're writing a fantasy sci-fi story, the most important rule is to create the rules. Like, you can break whatever reality you want, but you have to make the rules and stick to them, which is where no one's gone before did. That was very clear. It stuck to the rules. These rules make no fucking sense whatsoever and completely inconsistent. But sorry, let me get back to Bokai. He's just goofy. And just the dialogue between him and Benjamin is like, oh, no one loved the game, and he has all these baseball metaphors. It's just cartoonish. I think is kind of being generous by saying cartoonish. And by cartoonish, I don't mean like a Lower Decks cartoonish. I mean like DuckTales cartoonish. And there's nothing wrong with DuckTales if you're 12. I know adults like to watch it for nostalgia, but still, I tried watching it the other day and I was just, couldn't get into it. But anyway, it's Scooby-Doo. Maybe it's another one. See, characters on Star Trek are serious, even if they're having a silly episode, like Move Along Home. Shouldn't be acting like they're from Scooby-Doo. It's a serious sci-fi drama show. Even if you're doing a comedic or more lighthearted episode, you shouldn't have their characters acting like Scooby-Doo. And the whole Bokai, it ain't over till it's over. Like, it's kind of funny. That's kind of funny in a so bad it's a good way, to be honest. But it's just, it's so terrible. It's so bad. All right, let me talk about the baseball, because I've heard recently, and this was on Memory Alpha as well, that the baseball that Benjamin has on his desk was from this episode. And some people say, well, this episode might suck, but at least it's where Benjamin got his baseball from. Is it, though? I forgot to mention this, and I can't even remember which episode it was, but I do specifically recall, because it wasn't that long ago, there was an earlier episode of Season 1, and again, I don't remember which one, but it was before this episode, because I just watched it recently, because I'm going through every episode of Season 1 in order, where Cisco had a baseball, and he was throwing it back and forth. Like a real baseball. It wasn't in the holosuite. So, he already had a baseball. So how do we know that the baseball he keeps on his desk was the one he got in this episode? I had meant to check and see if there was a baseball on his desk before this episode, but I forgot, because you have to pay very close attention to the background set during scenes, which is something I don't usually do. But I'll keep an eye out after this episode to see if the baseball's on his desk. So maybe, but even that wouldn't prove that it's from this. So I don't know. I kind of think it's just fan headcanon that this baseball's from. Because they never state it in the episode. And as I said, go back and I wish I could tell you which episode, but I don't remember. I think it was maybe the Negus, when Jake was late for dinner and Daxon came over, and I think that's when Cisco was like, I don't know, I might be wrong. It was definitely happened, even if it wasn't that episode. I definitely, just because when I saw it, I was like, hey, he has a baseball, and this is before the episode. So how do you know that baseball is actually from Bokai? I don't know. Maybe there was something behind the scenes. Maybe the writers confirmed it or something like that. But I don't know. It seems to me like it's just headcanon. Not that it particularly matters. I will say, Dramatis Persona, an episode I'll get to shortly, when Cisco made that clock, oh God, can't wait to talk about the clock, that actually stays in his office. And that is distinctly from that episode. And that stays around. But the baseball thing, maybe he didn't have it in his office. Maybe he was just in his room when he would play with it, and it was a different one. And so this one's special, so he put it in his office. I don't know. I don't pay attention to the background stuff. But I'll try to keep an eye out going forward to see if I see it there. Anyway, I definitely saw his clock. I remember seeing, I clocked the clock. Anyway, So, okay, so many things. So there's the Odo, when he imagines Quark in the cell being like, you put me here, get me out of here right now. And that's Odo's being his imagination. He goes, no imagination indeed. If Odo really wanted to arrest Quark, there's multiple occasions where he could have done that. He should have arrested Rom for attempting to kill Quark, for one, and for another, when Quark for example, arranged the mercenary, which Odo was fully aware that Quark arranged the mercenaries to go steal a Federation ship, and they murdered a whole bunch of people, and Quark is an accessory to murder, and Odo did nothing. And or the time where Quark arranged a robbery to steal from the Miradorn, which resulted in a firefight, and when the Miradorn died, so he was like partially responsible for the death, or at the very least like robbery, and Odo did nothing. And it's not just those are two huge examples, but there's a lot of just the minor stuff. And also going forward through the show, there would be a lot of chances that Odo could have easily arrested Quark, but he chooses not to. In fact, Worf would get on his case about it, or Brennan was getting on his case about it in the earlier episode. It's like, you let this criminal run around, and Odo's like, I keep him in check. And it's implied later that with Worf that he was like, why do you allow this criminal? And Odo's like, and Sisko explains, well, he knows that Quark is, he can sometimes be useful, so it's good to keep around and that stuff. So clearly Odo does not want to arrest Quark. So why does he imagine Quark being arrested and yelling, get me out of this cell? Yeah, that might be a minor thing, but it just goes along with everything about this episode and why it's so terrible. So, for those of you who may have seen my reviews for Star Trek Next Generation, know I talk about Season 5 was particularly bad of this, but where sometimes they'll do an episode with an A plot that's like some sort of character story, and a B plot that's some bullshit anomaly BS that has nothing to do with anything, and it's just there to create a threat, and it's just an A plot, B plot that have nothing to do with each other, and the B plot's a waste of time that nobody really gives a shit about, and it's just there to create a threat. This qualifies. If this episode wasn't bad enough, this definitely qualifies. Now, by the B plot, I'm referring to the singularity or an anomaly, whatever the hell they want to call it, that's about to cause the station to be destroyed, and the whole Bajoran system is at risk. Granted, it is related to the A plot because it turns out that it's just imaginary. Whether or not it was actually a real risk, or whether or not their lives are at risk at all, or not, is something that the episode does not explain because these rules are so fucking inconsistent and it makes no goddamn sense. But regardless of that, it is clear, even though it's related to the A plot, it is definitely throughout. That's just at the end of the episode when they reveal it's imaginary, because throughout the episode it is presented as its own separate plot that doesn't really have anything to do with the other plot. It's just, and its funny thing is, because I talked about how, TNG Season 4 did it 4 times, TNG Season 5 did it 7 times, but Season 6 of TNG so far has only done it twice, and both those examples were like kind of weak examples of that barely qualify. Whereas I think DS9 Season 1 acts probably more guilty of it than Season 6 of TNG, which is odd because DS9 really going forward, after Season 1, doesn't do this at all. This is something that Voyager does billions of times, and TNG does a lot, and it usually involves a lot of technobabble, which this episode most certainly involves tons of technobabble, which is trapping that DS9 mostly avoids. That TNG, particularly Season 5, and Voyager, pretty much all seasons, get bogged down in too much technobabble nonsense, where DS9 is actually, and this is something Ira Stephen Bear talked about, he was saying it was harder for him to watch the earlier seasons, including Season 3, which was much better than the first two. I don't understand why everyone doesn't know this as the objective fact that it is, but some people are under the delusion, the incorrect false delusion that the show didn't get good until season 4. That will baffle me as well, but they can be wrong. That's their choice. But anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with this. But Ira Stephenberg talks about when he watched earlier seasons of the show that it's hard for him to watch it because of all the technobabble. And so that's something that he, as the showrunner, which started in season 3, which is why that's when the show got good, by the way, something that he strived to take out of the show, and effectively did do that in later seasons. There was pretty much no technobabble. So this episode comes off more as a TNG episode. It's written like one. And I talked about this before. This is another trappings of DS9 season 1, that they use ops as like the bridge, like is used on TNG, like the main station where everyone's like at their stations and trying to solve it. This is one of the biggest examples of that in the show. And you could say, oh, but there's a lot of episodes of DS9 season 1 that are kind of like TNG, and I talked about a few of them already, like Q-less being a huge one for obvious reasons. And then the next episode has got another TNG character, has no business being on DS9. Funny thing, they brought her back 2 more times after this, but don't fucking ask me why that happened. But anyway, so yes, there are a lot of examples, especially in season 1 specifically in season 1 of DS9 trying to be like TNG. But as I said, that's only a fraction of why this episode's bad. That contributes to the whole of the shit storm that is this episode and everything wrong with it. But it's actually a huge thing, because this is probably the worst offender in terms of trying to be like TNG, in terms of using useless technobabble, and in terms of having a B-plot anomaly bullshit that nobody gives a shit about. These are trappings that DS9 is distinctly known for not having. And it's all here in this episode. And not only does it have all these failings of TNG, it tries to be like TNG but much worse, it comes off as goofy and childish and dumb, and pretty much rips off Where No One Has Gone Before, does what it did, but much worse. Now, other people pointed out that Where No One Has Gone Before itself was kind of taking a lot of liberties from the original series, Shore Leave, which, sure, to an extent, but I honestly think that Where No One Has Gone Before is much better than Shore Leave, but that is just my humble opinion. Regardless, it was totally different, because Where No One Has Gone Before had the Enterprise travel to the other side of the galaxy and their thoughts came to life, whereas Shore Leave is like, kind of like Westworld. They go to the planet where people make these mechanical things of what people imagine. And by the way, the rules in Shore Leave were also very consistent, unlike the rules here, which has no consistency whatsoever and make no sense. And so, and then there's the ending, where Buck Bokai, damn it, Buck Bokai comes to Benjamin and is like, with a lot of baseball metaphors about, oh, no one knows how the visiting team's going to be treated. Anyway, he explains that they're a group of aliens, came through the wormhole, wanted to learn more about their station, so that's why they made it the imaginations come to life. I can see also why some people compare it to Imaginary Friend. Also not a good episode, but at least slightly better than this one. I'm sorry, but it is. Because that's also where the aliens come and take something out of someone's imagination. But here, it's the entire station, not just one little girl. I'm sorry, but that makes absolutely no sense why these aliens would bring the imagination to life to learn more about them. Like, that's not how you learn more about this. That reminds me of that TOS episode Savage Curtain, where, Abraham Lincoln floated in space episode where, goddamn that episode. I think this is, I did have that episode. I believe I had that higher on my top 25 worst list than this, but not by much. They're very comparison. Let's see, I don't know. I think I have this higher. Yeah, I know this one is higher than the Savage Curtain, which... that says a lot. That's the Abraham Lincoln floating in space episode. But yeah, I stand by that. I actually think this is worse than that one, because this one was number 14 and Savage Curtain was number 20. But splitting hairs, they're really close to each other. I could change my mind depending on my mood, but still, I think that's right. I think this is worse than that. But anyway, it reminds me of that because... they had Abraham Lincoln and Surak team up with Kirk and Spock to have a big battle royale with Genghis Khan and Kalis. Help me, Spock. And these other made up characters, Colonel Green. And they said they did this to learn more about the concepts of good and evil and learn more about them. I'm like, how are you learning more about these concepts or learning more about the Federation by doing this bullshit? You're not learning anything by having these imaginary historical figures fight each other and go, help me, Spock. If you want to learn, read a fucking book. Read a library. Have a conversation with Kirk and all this. This is something I railed against in my review for that episode, and that applies here as well. If you want to learn about this guy, the whole thing, you never know how the visiting team is going to be treated. That's supposed to explain why they made their imaginations come to life. Why the fuck would you make their imaginations come to life? And also, by the way, when Sisko is you didn't have to put the whole station at risk, and Bokai's bullshit response was, we didn't put the station at risk. It was your imaginations that did it. But you're the one that made it possible for their imaginations to come to life. So yes, you are the one that put the station at risk. If the station was even at risk. That's, again, very inconsistent and unclear because this episode sucks. And the writing sucks. But if we do say that the station was really at risk, this is by far your fault. That whole bullshit is it was your imagination that did it, but you're the one that made it possible for their imaginations to come to life. And Sisko's still I understand. Thank you. I'll cherish this forever. They nearly killed an entire solar system, an entire civilization. They nearly wiped them out. And your response is to be is to believe his bullshit excuses and to be it's so great. Hopefully we'll see you again. Pulling nails. Watching this episode is like pulling nails. Anyway, I think I'm finally done with this shit show of an episode. I could probably go on with how many flaws there are in this episode, but I think I've made my point. Anyway, so I would now like to thank all my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Antarius and Brandon Nilhouse. Thank you all both so very, very much for your very strong support. I would also like to give a shout out to Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Maddie Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Michelosio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Alice, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we have a few Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, if wishes were horses, more like these bitches make poor sense. Okay, so this one is bad. Bottom of the barrel. I heard they were going to have O'Brien seeing a leprechaun, but they felt like that was racist or something because his character is Irish. Anywho, the only way they could have made it worse is if Bashir dreamed of Vic Fontaine. I do have to say that is one of your lesser ones, but fair enough. Next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, the first few minutes of this episode I really like. Odo and Quark have another classic scene. The scene with O'Brien with the O'Briens were great until the fake leprechaun appeared, Rumpelstiltskin. I just let people know that leprechauns are not real. The rest of the episode is boring except when Odo imagined Quark in the holding cell and Odo dealing with stuff on the promenade. So my rating is 3. Today I'll brew, tomorrow bake, merrily I'll dance and sing, for next day will a stranger bring. Little does my lady dream, Rumpelstiltskin is my name, out of 10. So I'm assuming that quote's from Rumpelstiltskin. I never read it, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, actually, you bring up a good point. The scene with the O'Briens was actually good when Miles was reading to Molly. It was good seeing him being a good dad, and then the happy couple with Miles and Cake. It was good to see them actually getting along for once. But yeah, then as soon as Rumpelstiltskin appeared, all went in the toilet. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, nothing brings the spirits down when you start watching a DS9 episode, then O'Brien starts telling Molly the story of Rumpelstiltskin. It makes the viewer say, please no, and then, gosh darn it, Rumpelstiltskin shows up. It's this episode. Outside of the fact that Cisco's baseballs on the desk is believed to originate in this episode by the mysterious race, the lame TNG/Voyager style episode of a curious energy race is, well, bad. Outside of Season 1, Bashir getting his justified humiliation and Odo seeing his fantasy of Quark in jail, granted he already had golden opportunities, one would argue this season alone, this is practically unwatchable. I guess we see at least Kira has PTSD issues of trauma that at least was more vivid and handled better than Tasha in Where No One Has Gone Before. But boy, I'd rather see Where No One Has Gone Before than this nonsense. 1 emu on the promenade out of 10. Yeah, no, absolutely. The Kira thing is interesting, that it brings up issues of her PTSD, and maybe that's why she imagined stuff like that. But still, I can't. That scene just angers me because the logic of how the imagination things work is just so off. Anyway, but anywho, next comment is from Ricky, who says, this was the episode that I was talking about a while ago, that this is the worst episode of the first season and one of the worst episodes in the entire show. I can't begin to describe how dumb, dull, stupid, and uninteresting this episode is. This episode is also very annoying to watch. So if what you think comes to life, then why the hell is Rumpelstiltskin still around? And why is the imaginary Dax still around Bashir when he clearly doesn't want her around? It seems inconsistent to me. And also the whole promenade snowing, then a wild emu running around was just plain stupid. And to top it all off, it has a stupid anomaly bullshit that was causing all of this crap to happen. The one decent scene in this episode is the opening scene with Quark and Odo, where Quark talks about getting Odo a holosuite and he responds, "Oh, you're disgusting." That was hilarious, so my rating is, of course, a 1 out of 10. One of the worst of the show. I actually didn't like that Odo and Quark scene at the start of the episode that much. It was okay. It was definitely better than the bulk of the episode, for sure. But actually, as far as like many of the other Odo and Quark banter we've gotten this season, this is kind of weak compared to that, to be honest. But I did like, it's definitely better in this episode. I did like when he said, "You're disgusting." He's like, "Till the day I die." Like, stuff like that is good stuff. But anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, "In my opinion, this is clearly the worst episode of the first season, and it is my top 5 worst episodes of Deep Space Nine. The script is so bad and full of inconsistencies. For example, if they have really explored the galaxy for quite some time, I can't believe they have never met any other species with imagination yet, since they are clearly much rarer than species with the same sort of imagination. I can't decide what is worse, the plot about the anomaly or about the aliens. Of course, these aliens are never mentioned again. If I had watched DS9 around this time I started watching Star Trek 2 years later, I would have quit the series after the last and this episode. My rating is a 1 out of 10. I was too much into Star Trek at the time. As I said, this was probably the deepest I was obsessed with Star Trek. So not even this episode made me want to quit Deep Space Nine. I would never quit Deep Space Nine. I heard about some people said Move Along Home made them quit. I'm like, well, then your faith is weak then. If that episode made you quit this amazing show, which granted not amazing yet, but TNG took 3 years to get good, and so does DS9. But anyway, I remember when this episode first came out because I was actually on a school camping trip. Like, I was kind of forced to go. I didn't really want to, but it was part of a school thing, and we were camping, and it wasn't that far away, and I was like upset because I wanted to watch new Deep Space Nine episode, but somebody had a portable TV, and so I borrowed it and was watching Deep Space Nine and watching this episode, and then the teachers eventually came and yelled at me and was like, "You're supposed to be camping, you shouldn't be watching TV." And so I had to, but it comes on like twice a week, so I think maybe my parents were taping it, but it also, they used to show it twice a week, so I'd get the replay on the weekends, so I did get to watch it, the whole thing, eventually. Lucky me. And then, because I remember where I was watching it on this team, because I was going out of my way to sneak and watch Deep Space Nine, I was watching it, I was like, yeah, this kind of sucks. But anyway, one thing I did want to mention that I did kind of forget to mention is the whole Bashir thing, because I do think that there's some good scenes with Bashir and Dax. I mean, it's still goofy and silly, especially towards the end when the imaginary Dax gets injured and Bashir has to heal her, and they try to make it heartwarming. I was like, it's just stupid. But I did like the scene where the real Jadzia had to, Bashir was obviously super embarrassed, but she had to point out that, look, I kind of feel like we're invading your privacy, because everyone has imaginations and fantasies, and usually they're private, and they're kept private for a reason, and I feel like we're invading your privacy. And Julian's like, oh, thank you for your understanding, but then she just can't help herself. She's like, but she's so submissive. That's really how you want me to be, submissive? And then she shows up and start arguing with her. So it was an okay scene. It was an oasis and an otherwise turd of an episode. But it was not like it's amazing stuff. It just, appears good compared to everything else. But I do agree that Terry Farrell's acting, like playing the two characters at once, was good. Again, a highlight of an otherwise absolutely terrible episode. Thank you so much, patrons, for your comments. So my rating for If Wishes Were Horses out of 10 is obviously, of course, a 1. The worst. Among the worst episodes of the entire franchise, number 14 on my list of worst episodes in the Star Trek franchise, and I stand by that. If anything, I think it should be higher. But then if I look at the other 13 episodes, I'll be like, oh yeah, I get why those are high, because they're all terrible. This is definitely in the worst sphere of DS9. As it says, it will be one of the mysteries of the universe that will forever boggle my mind, how people can point to Move Along Home as the worst episode of season 1 and one of the worst of the entire franchise, when this episode is right here. This episode exists. Anyway, so that is it for my review of If Wishes Were Horses. So let's see what's coming up next on my channel. Monday will be my review for Second Chances. Wednesday will be my review for The Forsaken, another golden DS9 episode. And Thursday will be my review for Dramatis Persona. And Saturday I will be reviewing Season 2 of The Rings of Power. Didn't bother doing every episode because I don't like this show that much anymore, and I want to focus more on Star Trek. But still gotta do the season as a whole once it's done. So that is what's coming up on my channel. So be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.